Hey everyone, welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. What I have for you today is part three, the final part of my conversation with George Klabin, at least for now. So, if you've been following, we kind of started with how he got his start, how he became interested in jazz. We shifted into how he was able to sort of parlay his experience DJing on WKCR into producing and recording so much great music from the 60s onward, including, so many incredible artists, so many incredible labels. And here in part three, we're going to get into his experiences founding his own label, Resonance Records. So, how did that come to be? His experiences seeking out some of this music that he's chosen to release. His participation in Record Store Day. Really, Resonance is a highlight almost every single Record Store Day. They have at least a couple of titles, sometimes more than a couple of titles. So obviously, all of this is keeping the man busy. But he's also producing new Brazilian jazz music. He has a Brazilian jazz radio program called The Heart of Brazil that he's working on as well. So in this conversation, we're going to kind of get into all of that. So I hope you enjoy. So I guess, and maybe this is a little bit of a sort of a transition kind of question, but you mentioned a little bit ago recording the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra album, and I thought that was pretty interesting because I believe that you recorded it, but it wasn't put out, and then you had the opportunity to put it out for
Yeah,
the first time with Resonance. I know that you also have Charlie Rouse's Cinnamon Flower, which is one of your releases that's coming up later this year. You originally recorded that. That one was obviously put out as well. But what is that? Kind of maybe pivoting a little bit to Resonance. I mean,
yeah.
that's got to be interesting for you to take this music that you were a part of so many years ago, and then to be able to put some of it out again, and sort of the
Yeah,
modern day.
well, what happened was, originally I had a lot of recordings left over that were like had never been come out, and from the studio or this or that, from going on location when I was younger, and the Thad Jones Mel Lewis was the most important thing that I think I did in the history of jazz for me, the way I look at it, because it's such an incredible band and music and everything about it. And I met Eddie Daniels. I met all kinds of people there. Some I already knew, the great players that used to. Jim and Andy's, you heard of Jim and Andy's, of course, was the coffee shop where they would sit under A&R studios and be called up with a phone line to go play. Like they were just hanging because they knew that they always needed musicians at odd times. It was incredible. So, Alan Gass says, we're putting together this great all-star band. These are the great musicians, the great jazz musicians, you name it. Bob Brookmeyer, Jerome Richardson, Jerry Dodgen, blah, 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 Frank Hank Jones, and my brothers, and so on. So we would like to get a recording because we'd like to get a record deal. So I said, okay. So I go down there like an innocent with 6 microphones and my headphones, my mixer, and my tape recorder. And that was it. And they set me up on the famous coffee table again, right? And so I'm listen. I told them there was no time for me. It was like I set up my mics and I said I have one for each section, one for the piano, one for the bass, and one for the trumpet player's dad because he's facing the band, and so I have to have a mic just for him. So I had no mic for the drums. As it turned out, I didn't need one because that room is so dead. I was so lucky. I got such a great drum sound without having a mic there that it's just unbelievable. Anyway, so that was a recording that we made that it wasn't that hard to make it because it was mixed beautifully by them. They balanced it, and whenever somebody played a solo, because these are all studio musicians, they knew they had to play on the mic, so they grabbed the mic. Let's say there's 4 guys, right, sax players, and the guy at one end has the mic, and the guy, well, I think I put it in the middle. So wherever, if it wasn't one of the 2 guys in the middle, it was the guy in the middle would go over because it was solo and hold it for the guy playing. It was great, So I was getting all this, presence on the thing. That's what you can hear. And so then, of course, I came back 6 weeks later with 10 mics and did it again. And then all this stuff was sent to a record label, and it turned out that it was Solid State. Remember that? Solid
Yeah,
State
sure.
Records. They signed them. And I was sort of disappointed because they didn't want to use any of my stuff. It's how it is. I understand. so that I get to keep them, right? And here I am, zillions of years later, decades and decades later, and we put it out, and piece of jazz history, really, really big piece of history.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's got to be exciting, and I'm sure you have other recordings that maybe you're not able to release for a variety of reasons. But
Yeah,
let's talk about Resonance Records. So
yeah,
Resonance Records is a label that you founded. Well, I mean, you say what was it like '08 something like that?
yeah, something. What happened was I bought the house next to mine. I was in Beverly Hills. I was very fortunate I could do this, and I could make a studio out of it. So I wanted to have a studio again, and this is now 2003. And then when I in 2005 it was finally finished, and all I wanted to do at first was do concerts. So I had enough space in there to put 80 people in there and videotape it and record it professionally. And I bought a great piano. I bought a Fazioli grand piano. So it was the best of everything, you know? And so people would come, and I'd bring in people from New York, from everywhere. I had Steve Kuhn came in, and Dave Kikoski, Eliane Elias, and we would do recordings as well as video. And it was wonderful. I didn't think about label yet. And then some point, Don Lukoff, do you know what Don Lukoff is? He's a promoter. Uh,
Okay.
but basically, he's a publicist who has gotten involved in concerts and so on. He's been involved in jazz his whole life. So I met him, and he told me that if I start, why not start a record label? I have all these recordings and so on, and that's how it started. And then he got me a person to run the label, which didn't work out. But then Zev came along. He got me Zev. But first there was somebody else there. I'm not going to name the name because it's awful. Yeah, he just took money from me, and didn't do very much. And yeah. Anyway, so that started around 2007, I think, something like that. It's been almost 18 years, and started putting out CDs only, and the LPs came later. That was when Zev came in, which would have been several years after that. And he said, "Well, why don't we do some LPs? There's a good business there, and you have some important recordings." And that's how that developed. And so, at the beginning, these were things that I had already had. Then we started obtaining, and also I did recordings for CDs and some LPs. The historical stuff is what really needs to go out on LP, and the rest of it was usually just digital and CDs.
Right. So recordings like some of the Grant Green, the Wes Montgomery, like to what extent were you aware of, or are you generally aware of recordings in advance versus
Yeah, well,
like, going out and finding them?
again, Zev was very helpful, and Zev said about the first Wes we did. He said that there's this recording that somebody told me about of Wes early, like something. Well, he had a very short career anyway, but it was somewhere in the prime area of his career that he had recorded, and it was some studio stuff too, and it was available, and somebody else wanted it, but we ended up getting it. We bid on it, and we got it. And I said, this is very important. I was a big fan of Wes, like so many people. And we put it out, and that's how it started. And as you know, we put out another, I think, six more. They just keep coming, and they sell very well. It's not an easy business for people that don't understand the record business. It's not easy because there's a lot of expenses involved: publishing expenses, musician expenses, recording expenses, distribution, and in the end, if you don't sell at least a few thousand, maybe 4 or 5,000 LPs, if you don't sell that many, you might break even if you're lucky. But I can't continue to break even all the time. So we have all kinds of considerations when we put these things out. But we always try to be respectful of the musicians, and we do beautiful packaging, as you know. I think we've set, and this is a lot of that is Zev Feldman, give him the credit. We set a standard for what is a really collector's item now today, numbered collector's item of a record, an LP, and I think you might agree with that. And what I see out today is some imitation in the sense of people doing that, their own way, but doing that double fold, and the liner notes, extensive, and the photos. But a lot of them, even the majors, don't put as far as I know, don't put as much into it anymore because it's jazz and they don't, doesn't sell as well, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because the sort of the community, the audio community that I'm in, and vinyl collectors and appreciators and everything. What strikes me about your label is that people who are interested in it have to have everything.
Oh,
So
nice. Like
they
that.
have their section of their shelves, right, with
Yeah.
all of their all of the resonance ones, and the idea of it being numbered is important to them, especially if it's a low number. Like it's very interesting to me because I think to your point, it sort of set a little bit of a standard that then others followed, especially for something like Record Store Day, where those are sort of restricted in quantity almost by design. It's a special kind of releases for the day. Um, so I just pulled up Grant Green's Slick live at Oil Can Harry's, which was one of yours from I think 2018 or 17, something like that. And I believe that was this a Record Store Day release?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Quite
So
successful.
how did you um how did you come to sort of to Record Store Day as a primary avenue
It was
for?
him. I mean, I'll give Zev credit. I mean, he told me about it way back when we first did it. I did not honestly know about it. I was not in the record business ever until I was. And so the first guy that I got, who I won't name, he only wanted to get paid and take it easy, and I paid him rather well. I was innocent, I didn't do much. And, we would produce CDs, which is so easy. It's easy, it's relatively inexpensive, and you don't sell a lot of them, and you don't make back your costs even, And then Zev came along and he said, we can do much better than that. And that's when the whole thing came about. So I give him a lot of the credit. And then he said, I think we can get records into Record Store Day, when did that start? Do you remember the first Record Store Day, when it was?
I'm not exactly
Well,
sure. I'll say this: it predated my sort of collecting of vinyl, so
when did you start?
like 2011, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, we were in it probably right around that, maybe just a little before that. But no, I think that's about right. Yeah. And yeah, so he's the one. And I give him all the credit.
How many years are these in development though?
Well, everything's different. Most of the time, it's a year, sometimes a little less. But realistically, you gotta do a year because getting everything together, you have to get a contract with the right people. That can take time. You have to plan out all the elements that you want to. Uh, well, then there's the sound and processing the sound and going over it, and then photographs and who's going to write this and that, and then of course. Um, it gets not doesn't always go smoothly. There are delays. There's wrong turns in the road. You go back, and um, so I would say a year is a good way of looking at it.
So thinking about your releases that Resonance has put out, do you have? I know you mentioned the Thad Jones, but like, which are the ones that you think like this is something like this is the one that I'm most proud of that I was able to put
There's
out
no
there?
one, which is great. It's long ago. There's no one anymore. That one was, and another one is the Bill Evans album that was never released on MPS in Germany, which is a great album, and you know what I'm talking about. Some
Yeah,
other
the
time, some other,
some other time.
yeah. And then we followed with another time, which was another concert, but it was, the some other time is the one that really, that was an unreleased, it's very rare to get a beautifully recorded, unreleased album by one of the most important musicians in the history of jazz. And it was staggering, and obviously did very, very well. As well as some of our West albums have done very, very well. No question about it. Um, but I can't tell you that I have one other than the Thad Jones, which I just think is so important because of the fact that what it changed the face of jazz big bands. It was what he would do is he would take a small group. The band would start out, let's say, with a quintet playing, and all of a sudden the band would come in, and it would be sometimes backing, sometimes it was morph into the whole thing, and it was so fluid and so beautifully done. Well, I'm not saying it was never done before, but I think he was the one who really packaged it up and made it a style out of it, a way of the big band performing it, these songs, and of course his music. He's a wonderful writer, and that also was rare. I mean, it's these are things that either didn't they existed and they were not known. Then I got involved and brought them out, and I can tell you that the recording that that we brought out is by far the most important and seminal recording of that band. I was very happy to be a part of this, and we're still doing this. And I'm very careful about this is a museum. Let me say to everyone what we really are. We're not a record label. We're a museum that puts out records instead of paintings. And these records are precious and beautiful. And yes, they are limited editions, but you can always hear them digitally. And what we really were doing is we're selecting history. We're selecting important history so that we can maintain it, just like a museum would do with paintings. And if something isn't authentic or isn't really very good, and everybody has their days, good and bad, we prefer not to deal with that. And so I think my taste, and to some degree, of course, Zeb's tastes are really important. And we've both been in the business in different ways, or in the jazz life. And you need that. You can't just start a jazz record label these days, or and think that you know what you're doing unless you have the history. And I'm one of the dinosaurs. I mean, I'm 79 years old. I don't know how much longer I'll be around. I'm very healthy, but so I'm funding it. I'm making sure that when I pass, it will continue. And the there has to be a place, for that. And so when people think about buying LPs, here's what I will say to them: if you can, if you're interested, buy our. You're supporting us. Buy our LPs. I mean, there's good music, and even if you haven't heard of the artist, you may be quite surprised. And if you have, so much the better. But you're supporting us, and I can't fund this all by myself. Obviously, it's quite an endeavor. So that's what I say about that.
So you've recently, independent of of everything that we've been kind of been talking about with resonance and record store day, you've recently gotten more involved with Brazilian artists and Brazilian music. And
Yeah,
I know that you said up front you spent time in Brazil
yeah.
when you were a kid. So did you form a connection to Brazilian music then, or is it something
That's
that you've
Yeah.
yeah?
Okay. I was born in 1946, and guess when bossa nova really started? 1960. I know 58 was the first bossa nova, release, but I mean, it really got moving in the 60s, and then it spread all over the world. And the best part for people that are not that familiar with bossa nova and maybe just have heard the term, it's a style of Brazilian music. The bossa nova means the new thing in Portuguese. Bossa nova, new thing. And what it is it's they take the traditional samba kind of music, samba melodies and samba rhythms, which were known in Brazil, and you can look them up and hear them all over the place, and they're still done today. And they put jazz with it. The jazz being improvisation, being more switching back and forth between a straight samba beat and a little bit more of a jazz feel, and all of that. And so the jazz musicians were always looking for something new, and they loved it, and it immediately became very, very popular around the world, especially in jazz. And the other thing that's important to remember about here, this is my biggest point, is that this music has always got a melody and rhythm. And to me, those are the two elements. If you take those two elements out of music, it's not music. And if you take one out, it's not music. It's just partly music. If you have something that's a melody, but there's no rhythm at all, you're going to get tired of it. And the other way, if you have a lot of rhythm and no melody, that's even worse. I mean, yeah, you can dance to it, but it's not music to me, complete. So what Brazilian music has is all that. It has lots and lots of melody. And by the way, what was so great is that it started in the 60s, 60s and 70s is a time when music was at its best in the world, I believe. I don't know whether we'll ever go back there. So people that would like this, you need to go back. You need to, if you want to, explore. It's all over the internet. I'm going to start a show in just a few weeks on Brazil Connect. That is a website. It's a big Brazilian website, and they have streaming stations with the usual Brazilian music, more contemporary versions of stuff, and not necessarily that much announcing. There's the guy who puts it on does his own show, but a lot of it is just the latest stuff. I have all the original stuff because I bought it and collected it and even recorded it back then. And so um, I'll be playing this music, a 90-minute show on Thursdays and Sundays on Brazil Connect. You can look it up. There's already a blurb about it. You can see. I hope people will go. It's really good music, and it is jazz. It is. It is. I mean, you'll recognize some of the musicians. You know, Eliane Elias is famous. She's started out as a jazz musician, actually from Brazil, but and there's just so many others that and because I don't just want the authentic, like little cute little, samba music, something like that. We're talking bossa nova. Bossa nova means jazz. So it's jazz versions of great music. And there's lots of melody, lots of rhythm, and beautiful, beautiful melodies. Well, I mean, not everything is a ballad, but whatever it is, you feel it, you feel it, and it makes you happy. That's what music should do. It should make you feel. Sometimes you're going to feel sad because the music is so beautiful and so flowing, and so you feelings are what we don't have anymore in music, in the new music. I mean, if you listen to pop, it's not about that. It's trying to sell a product to people, and a personality is more important than the music. The personality singing, because that's how they make money, and it's all about money. So when it's about money, that's the end of that, in my opinion.
Well, no, it feels to me like a lot of this music, this samba music, was also recorded just really, really well.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's because of the sort of complexity with auxiliary percussion, but I just as a point of just as an example, I just picked up a Bud Shank and Claire Fisher record called Brasamba on Pacific Jazz, and I put it on my turntable, and I was shocked at how well it was recorded. And I almost feel like when these musicians were recording Brazilian music,
Yeah.
it turned out really, really well.
I think that it was new, and I think that people took extra care because they listened to it and they said there's a lot of subtlety. It's not all just like you see jazz piano trio, as great as they are, could be one of the greatest players, but you know what it's going to be. It's going to be the guy playing the piano, bass, and drums. Let's say, right? So that isn't what makes it interesting anymore. What is what they do with it. But with Brazilian music, it's kind of new. It's kind of like it's not so clear what's going to happen, and it'll shift, and the melodies will shift, or there'll be a several sections, an A, B, a C section, whatever. I don't know. So it's like you listen to it, you really listen to it, you let it come into you, and so to do that, the recording has to be clear. And luckily, it started in the '60s, which was already better. Recording was better in the '60s than it sure was then in the '40s and '50s. And it got even better in the '70s and so on. And the way I record, by the way, is I do a lot of close miking because I want presence. The secret when you record is not to get the room sound in. The best example I can give you is a piano. Take a beautiful grand piano, and a lot of people will say, let's open up the top like this, and put the stick up. And then we'll put the mics near the piano, like outside the piano, left and right, stereo, beautiful, right? The sound comes out of the piano, and it's authentic. But there's a problem with that. Unless you're in a room that's completely dead, which it could happen, but usually doesn't, you're going to pick up room tone, reflections. That room tone will make the sound less clear, a little more distant, and it can be a lot more distant depending. But also the drums, if there's drums in the room, leaks into the piano mics. So you get again problem with the drum sound. I like a nice, clean, present drum sound because then I can do so much with it. I can mix it and I can subtly, and the volume changes I make can be subtle, but not if it's leaking into the piano. I can't control that because if I want less of that, I have to take the piano level down. So it just doesn't work, and I can't separate them. You can't. There's no equalizer in the world. There's no real way that you can say, well, we'll take the drums out without affecting the piano because they happen to be in the same frequency range where you want the piano sound. So these are things that I learned. I also, by the way, I was the first studio in the East Coast and the second in the world to have a 32 track digital tape recorder, and this was in 1980. and that was made by 3M of all people. And they got out of the business very quickly, but they were in the business for a few years making tape recorders. And it was on tape, but it was digital. So when I heard the first ones, I was stunned because the bass, the quality of the bass was so clean. One of the only problems with audio recording on tape is the bass sound. It suffers from a condition that I can't remember the name of. I should know it, where the waveform is not perfectly reproduced. There's a shift in it, so that it's muddier. It's subtle. I'm not saying that you might even notice it, but as an engineer, you're in the room there and you're hearing it. Once I heard that, I said, "Oh my God, it's clean as a whistle. It's exactly what it should be." So digital at the beginning was already a big improvement in that area. But overall, what we've been doing, by the way, almost all our records are that we do in our studio are digitally recorded with great microphones and great instruments and great players. But I like it because I think it's real clean, and I think you know what I'm talking about. You've heard it. So that was a big development that happened.
Yeah. So you've been recently some of the recordings that you've been putting out, I think, are in collaboration with Eddie Daniels, and I know you
Yeah,
brought him up, a little while ago. But this is a name that comes up often in your catalog. I think first with there
Roger
was a beach
Kellogg,
band. Yeah, there's a Roger Kellaway recording. There's a couple of tribute albums too to Egberto. Is it Gismonti?
and Ivan Lins.
Yeah, and Yvonne Lins. So I guess talk about can you talk about your partnership, I guess, with Daniels, and obviously you have a shared appreciation for Brazilian music.
Well, the Eddie Daniels thing started when he played on the big band, and he was like in his 20s, right? So I noticed him, and I was quite impressed. And he did Reverend a solo that was great on something Reverend Morning Reverend, which you may remember. That's him. Great solo. I said, "Wow, this guy's really good." I never forgot it, right? And then I sold my studio in 1981, and I think it was like 82. I was invited by Roger. I knew Roger Kellaway since he was in New York playing in the Bob Brookmeyer band, and that's where I really heard Eddie. Heard a lot of Eddie, and I also befriended him. Because of that, and he was still in New York in those days. But then um, when I thought of doing these recordings, the Brazilian ones, which was quite a lot later, I thought of him because I thought, wouldn't it be great to have what he brings, because he has the right repertoire of, I'm sorry, the right instruments. He can play, of course, clarinet, which is a very very difficult instrument to play well. People don't understand it. It looks simple, but it's called the snake because it is the most of those type of reed and wind instruments. It's considered, I think, the most difficult. Flute, clarinet, tenor sax, and even on this new record, which I don't know if you know it, I'll tell you in a minute, soprano. And so this is a tribute to Milton Nascimento. Do you know the record Courage? That's the first record that Milton Nascimento ever recorded on A&M.
Okay, yeah, I'm aware of that album.
That
Yep.
is one of the greatest albums of music I've ever heard, and I never forgot it. And in fact, people used to ask me, "What's your favorite record?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, there's that one." So and it really was, and I've stayed with that. So a few years ago, I said, I'm going to do a tribute to this record. And Milton is not, he's getting along. He's not going to be here much longer. He's pretty ill. So I called Eddie and we did it. And we did it with Kuno Schmidt again, the great arranger that I think is Klaus Ogerman. I think he's as good as Klaus Ogerman.
Hmm.
Um, and we did it, and it's coming out now in August. It's coming out, but it's only coming out not as an LP, only CD and digital. The Charlie Rouse is coming out LP, but I want your viewers to understand something. Very limited edition. We're only doing about 1,000 LPs. So if you want this, you better get your hands on it. You know,
That's good to know. And so I guess for the benefit of everyone, this is an expanded edition of the Charlie Rouse album. It has additional content that was not on the original that was put out on Douglas. Was it
well,
Douglas Records?
more importantly than that, every single one of the other, there's 8 tunes. He used seven, and there's one, as I said, that was never used. That will be on this album. But I have the original recording, which is so much more musical. What happened is he made it more commercial. So he put a different drummer on there. A drummer who's like an R&B drummer, very famous drummer, but still, that. And then he put Dud Bascom on bass. The same thing. These are pop guys, very good. But what happened is, and then he cut off some solos. He made it shorter, this and that and the other. So it's really very different. And we have both on there. I want you to know that we have two LPs. One LP is that's the first one. And the second LP is the original recordings that were given uh, to the label, that label, to put out Alan Douglas, and he's the one who made all these decisions to make it more commercial. So what happened is I had a copy of this. Thank God I put it away. Nobody had a copy. It would never have come out if I didn't have my copy that I when I gave the mixers, because I was paid to do this. Charlie came into my studio. I didn't hire him. I didn't do anything. It was like he's using my studio, my engineering, and he brings all the musicians in, some of the guys I knew well, and we had this wonderful time recording it. And then he takes the mixes that I made and sells it, and that's the last I heard of it. They took the tapes out, the multi tracks, and and changed them. But I had this one mix. And so this is what you're going to hear. This is a piece of history, guys. Really is. And I think you're going to like it very, very much. It's very musical. And it's again the same idea. Lots of melody, lots of rhythm, interesting, not the same thing all the way through, sections, beautiful stuff.
Yeah, great artists on it, and yeah, obviously the heavy influence of Brazil. In fact, I think I think he has the translations. He has like on the album cover, you can see that the names of each of the songs, and then the Brazilian, or excuse me, the Portuguese, kind of
Yeah.
name for each of the songs. So heavy influence there.
Don Salvador, the pianist, he wrote most of the arrangements and the songs. Most. I don't know if all of them, because I only have the mixes. I don't have all the details, and that wasn't on the record either. But the thing is that he's now got to be in his mid 80s, and he used to play and still plays at a restaurant on the East River called, I forget what it's called. It's a very nice restaurant. I've eaten there a long time ago. He plays piano in the evening, solo piano. He's still playing there. I think it's 40 years or more, maybe 50 years. I mean, I've never heard of anything like this. So he's very happy that this is coming out, because this is him. What it morphed into is disappointing to me. There may be people who prefer it. I'm not going to argue with you guys. That's up to you. But I'll tell you, um, it's different. It's much more commercial in its way, and that's a hard thing to do with this music. So I don't think it even works that well, because it doesn't want to go that way.
No, that's really exciting to hear. I can't wait to hear these the way that it might have been, right?
Oh, there's a little girl on the cover. Have you seen the cover?
Yeah,
That's
sure.
the little African American girl who's like 5. She lives about a mile from me here, and we've had dinner, and she's a beautiful, tall, gorgeous, 40-some-year-old woman, and very successful in her work. And her sister lives not too far from a place in New York, in Long Island, where my wife lives. My wife has a house there, so we go back and forth to that house to here, and so we met her, and it couldn't be two more different personalities. It's very interesting. But anyway, it's wonderful. This is the other part of this what I'm doing that's so satisfying, is to work with this music from this period, and then sometimes be able to meet the actual people who were involved in it, recorded it, or invented it, or whatever. And I've done this with so many different people. I mean, I literally could go on for another few hours. I'm not going to, obviously, but I could, with more and more stories that will just blow you away, of this and how that happened and that. And again, your listeners, I'm talking to you guys. Good for you that you are listening to this music. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is before there were all these choices. You're making a choice to listen to something. Take the time, put this thing on there and put the needle on there. This is not, everything is like, no, just do this, push a button and it comes out, blah, blah, blah. And so you're taking the time and you're listening to it and you're feeling what it was like. And that is a piece of history that I don't know if it'll ever be repeated. I don't think it can be, because we've gone way past the whole feeling and morals and way of looking at that. And so I'm just glad that I had a nice significant piece in it. I hope I really don't have an ego in this. I don't want to have an ego in this. I want to just be grateful for what I've been able to give. And it's made me so happy. I'm a happy human being. I think you guys probably can get that from me. And I'm not trying to be opinionated or arrogant. I'm just very grateful for my life. And I'll leave you with the thought. What I always do is I have 3 words that I remember every day. Think of others. When you're in that state, you're always going to be in a good state. When you think of yourself, not always. What can I get out of it? But when you think of other people that you care about or whatever, just that's the way to look at life, in my opinion. So I will leave you with that.
All right, so that concludes part three and sort of this series of conversations. I am very thankful to George for taking the time to chat on my channel and share all of this incredible sort of history that he was a part of, and really his sort of shaping of jazz. I mean, I don't think that's an overstatement when you consider his body of work. So I don't know about you, I'm really excited for this upcoming release that we chatted about. So definitely head over to Resonance Records and check that out and pre-order. Check out his radio program on Connect Brazil, the Heart of Brazil. So again, Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern and Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern. Definitely check that out. I'll include links in the description to all of this. I hope this has been interesting. It certainly has for me, and I love to sort of, it's like peeking behind the curtain, right, of what went on during the recording of so much of this great music. And fortunately, George continues to produce all of this great music for us to enjoy. So again, many thanks to George Klabin, and thank you all for your attention. I'll see you next time.